Okay, by now most of you have already given your pretest, and you probably have taken those scores and put them into one of the spreadsheets that were sent out a couple of weeks ago, and now you're sitting down with your PLC and trying to establish your growth targets for your students. This is probably the most difficult part of the entire process, because setting the growth targets can be an extremely tricky thing to do. So we've laid out 3 different scenarios, or at least 2 different scenarios for possible ideas for establishing your growth targets. Some of the teachers at Mentor High School created a rubric where, based upon a student's pre-assessment score, a final exam score in a similar class maybe the year before, final grade from a year before, the student's overall GPA, and the first quarter grade, they converted those into points. And then, so there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 criteria here. You could get up to 4 points based upon your scores. So the best you could do is get 20 points on this rubric. Then they set your post-assessment goal accordingly based upon these 5 data points. The important thing to consider is that they are using multiple data points in establishing those growth targets. A student who did not fare too well on the rubric, for instance, they scored a 7 or below because of all of these things up here, they had a growth target set at 60. Couple other things to keep in mind here. Remember to be very careful when you are converting rubric grades into percentages. You cannot do just a straight conversion using a fraction, saying that someone who got a 3 on a 5-point scale is going to get a 60% or a D. Oftentimes the score of a 3 on a 5-point scale is more along the lines of a C and not a D. So be very careful when you're converting rubric scores into percentages. There's one other method. It's called the Austin method because it's what's used in Austin, Texas. In this method, what you do is you take a student's pretest score and you subtract it from the total number of points possible. So in this case, let's say a student got a 10 out of 100 on the pretest. The maximum that student can grow is 90 points, right? That would be a perfect score on the post-test. So what you do is you take that 90, you divide it by 2, that would give you 45, and then you add on the 10 points from the pretest, and that student's growth score would be set at 55. That is below 60%, it is below proficient, but that student still grew 50%, which would mean that he's made adequate growth. And you can use this for a student who scores well on a pretest or a student who does not score well on the pretest. This is a very common model, and your PLC might decide to use that. If you have other ideas about creating growth targets, feel free to contact me or to talk to somebody on the SLO review committee. And the important thing is to try to do this in conjunction with other members of your PLC. Thank you.